details around the newly passed by City Council parking laws
Yes,
and how specifically they may affect our reviews. Yep.
absolutely. So if you remember, back in December of last year, the City Council referred to you a draft local law amending the off-street parking requirements for the city that pretty dramatically changed the concept of how we regulate parking in the city of Beacon. So instead of having parking minimum requirements, the local law established maximum parking requirements in certain districts and sort of a range of parking requirements in other districts. So the City Council received your comments from your review of that local law back in December, and they continued to review the local law until last month when they finally adopted it at the beginning of August. So the off-street parking local law is adopted. It's been filed with the Department of State. It is now effective. So I thought now would be a good time to kind of go through what it is that actually ended up in the final draft and how it affects your reviews. So and I should also mention, if you look for the local law on E-codes, to access the Beacon City Code, it's not in the text of the code itself. You have to look at that separate little button that says New Laws. So it hasn't been folded into the code itself yet by general code. So, as I mentioned, the local law does create maximum parking standards in some zoning districts and then a range for others. So in the CMS, the Linkage District, and the Waterfront Development District, there's no minimum parking requirement unless otherwise determined by the planning board. There's just a maximum. In all the other districts, there's a range. The local law also eliminated that 1964 parking exemption that we see every once in a while on applications. That was the exemption that basically said, if your proposed use is 25% or less more intensive than the use that existed in 1964, then you don't have to provide any parking.
That's gone.
So that's gone, completely gone. So applicants would have to research what was the use in 1964 and look through all of the historical documents and figure that out. That is no longer the case. The local law also increased landscaping requirements within parking areas. And this is an important one. It requires now green stormwater practices for parking areas other than single-family and two-family homes. If you remember, actually, that was one of your comments back to the City Council, that to impose green stormwater practices on single-family and two-family homes would be very onerous because of the maintenance requirements. And it also provides a little more flexibility. The original local law just called for pervious surfaces in parking areas. Now there's like a whole range of different types of green stormwater practices that can be implemented, and it's, there's a lot more flexibility.
Just curious, how does that differ from some of the requirements I've seen applicants in the past on large-scale developments adhere to relative to capture and then filter and then discharge?
John Russo can probably better explain this than I can, but there are just sort of capturing the water and slowly releasing it. That's sort of one of the more standard methods, but it's
green would be infiltration type systems, infiltrating the water back into the ground, where others you're capturing the quantity, you're treating it for quality, and you're releasing it at a controlled rate. Here, we're trying to recharge the groundwater, infiltrate it back. You may be capturing it and using it for watering your flowers and for other things such as that. Use of it.
Go ahead, sorry. So some of the examples in the local law is use of permeable pavement, bioretention, tree pits and urban forestry, stormwater planters, rain gardens, vegetated swales, stormwater harvesting and reuse, which is what John just mentioned.
Okay. It's good?
Yeah,
More of a soft end as opposed to.
I see.
right. That's a good way to put it. So I thought we'd kind of go through the local law section by section and just kind of highlight where it is that, there's hard and fast requirements and where the planning board has discretion when you're reviewing a site plan. So the local law starts out by basically saying that you can't get a permit unless you have compliant parking, standard requirement. The local law then discusses the location, use, design, construction, and maintenance of parking facilities. And a lot of these provisions are the same as what they were in the previous version with some tweaks. For example, for location, the code requires that parking facilities have to be provided on the same lot as the use for which they're serving, unless you have off-street parking facilities for structures and land uses on two or more contiguous lots. So if you have two neighboring lots that want to share a parking area, you can have one of those lots have the parking area on the lot for the other one to access in a single common facility. And of course, there, we would need to make sure that there was an easement or deed restriction to allow for that access in perpetuity. In any residence district, there is no parking allowed in the front yard, beyond the front plane of the building. You see that a lot in your applications. I know we talk about that a lot. The building inspector, when it's just subject to a building permit, or the planning board, when it's before you, can waive that requirement if there's some sort of unusual lot configuration that would require some flexibility for that standard.
Are there exceptions for front setback parking, certain zones?
For parking, you are allowed, you are allowed to, not in certain zones, but anywhere, in any residence district, you're allowed to have,
In any residence district?
you're allowed to waive that restriction against
Yeah.
having parking in the front yard if there's some unusual lot configuration that's necessitating it. So it's not just on any standard lot, but where there's
Could be
a
narrow
particular,
I should ask my question
Circumstance.
differently or better. Are there any non-residential zones where front setback parking is allowed or is able to be considered? I'm just curious.
that is a
I
good
would think the
question.
key.
That's,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of specific
Yeah, I
instances where
think
that's
the-
being requested.
Yeah, I think it's just in the residential districts where it's prohibited.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay, that helps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, this provision itself is specific to the residence
Residents,
districts. yeah.
gotcha, okay.
Let's see. So the code also provides that with respect to parking in residential districts, you're also not allowed to have parking in the side yard or rear yard that's next to a street. And otherwise, you need a 5-foot setback for parking facilities.
Wait, can you repeat that? So if it's in a side yard adjacent to a street, you need 5 feet setback?
You're not
Oh,
allowed to
no.
have the parking
Oh.
in a side yard or a rear yard that is adjacent to a street.
So
But
if
where you
a
have a,
corner- If you have a corner lot.
like a corner lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Or if it's like a through lot, and the lot has, the rear yard also is adjacent to a street, you can't have your parking facilities in that rear yard next to the
These
street.
corner lots rather
The local law keeps the standard size of the parking spaces at 9 by 18. Here, though, you do have some discretion. So you can reduce the size of the parking stalls to 8.5 by 18, except in the CMS district specifically for employee parking. So you can squeeze in probably a couple more spaces. You also have the discretion to allow for up to 30% of the parking spaces being provided to be compact spaces.
8.5 is characterized as compact?
It doesn't specify what compact is. The 8.5 by 18 is for employee parking.
I see.
And you can reduce the size of the parking stalls for that purpose, but then otherwise, up to 30% of the parking spaces can be compact spaces, whether it's for employee or guests of the site.
Is there any provision for charging stations at all?
No,
Yeah,
no,
just curious.
there is
Okay.
not. But that's certainly something that, can be discussed during site plan review.
Yeah.
Let's see, where a parking space is bordered by a wall or a column, whether it's on a surface parking lot or in a garage, the space has to be at least 10 feet by 18 feet. You also have to have at least 24 feet of a maneuvering area for cars to access each spot. But here you can, this is where another place where you have discretion, you can approve a lesser width where you have parallel or angled parking spaces. And I think we'll see that in one of the applications that we have
Yeah.
on the agenda tonight. Landscaping. So here, this is an important section that the city council increased the landscaping requirements. So the requirement is that all off-street parking areas have to be landscaped with appropriate trees, shrubs, and other plant materials and ground cover. And you have some discretion here as far as like what that landscaping looks like, what kind of plant materials are provided. The consideration that is folded into the code is to assure the establishment of safe and convenient and attractive parking, but to provide a minimum amount of maintenance. So including maintenance of the plant materials, giving snow plowing consideration, removal of leaves and other debris. So taking into consideration, maybe not an oak tree that's gonna, drop huge heavy leaves over the parking area, but maybe some other species. And I'm sure Karen can think of a lot of really good
I just
parking
whispered in her ear.
lot trees.
We're going to rely on her heavily for that.
Yes. There is a requirement to have at least one tree for every 8 spaces within the parking area, and that tree has to be at least 3 inches DBH, diameter at breast height. However, you do have the discretion here to require less trees, to allow for less trees in the parking lot if there are site constraints in the parking area that don't allow for the required number of trees. As an alternative, you could require a set aside of an equivalent number of trees and landscaping elsewhere on the same lot. So whatever trees would have otherwise been required in the parking lot, you can require the applicant to put those elsewhere on the site.
Jennifer, does it say
Yeah.
where the trees have to be planted in the parking lot? Is it on the outskirts of it, or is it every 8 spaces and then a space has to be dedicated to landscaping and a tree, or?
With respect to the one tree every 8 spaces, it doesn't say specifically. However, the next section that we're going to go over talks about planting islands. So wherever possible, the planning board is supposed to require planting islands that are at least 8 feet wide, and provide a guide to vehicle movement. So that would be one spot where the tree for every 8 spaces could go. You can require curbing. There's also a provision in here that provides a certain area that needs to remain clear for driveway sight distance. And then we talk about drainage and stormwater with respect to parking areas. So all parking areas are required to provide some type of management of stormwater pursuant to the code. It says that the stormwater areas have to be in compliance with the New York State Stormwater Management Design Manual, or Chapter 190 of our code, which is the stormwater chapter, or a method otherwise acceptable to the city engineer. Let's see, there's a drainage analysis that needs to be provided that has to account for pre- and post-development conditions, and also discuss remediation or mitigation for stormwater runoff. Maximum slope within a parking area can't exceed 5%. And here is where, this is a new provision in the code that we just mentioned at the top of this conversation, that except for one-family and two-family dwellings, the planning board shall require green stormwater infrastructure for the development of parking spaces. There is a sort of a relief valve there, and that is that unless the applicant establishes to the planning board's satisfaction that the underlying soils don't allow for natural drainage. So if the site is, 100% clay, or, just doesn't provide the type of soils for infiltration, then the applicant would not be required to do the green stormwater
Still required
practice.
to do some sort of stormwater, but not green?
Yes,
Okay.
not green, yeah.
Is a Coltech, those structures, are those considered green?
Yes, you can use them in both ways. You can actually wrap the system in plastic, and so it doesn't infiltrate, or you can use them as infiltration systems. But down in Main Street, in a lot of these areas, I know there's a lot of clay. From all the infrastructure work we've done, it's pure clay.
But those work in clay soils, right? They're just expensive.
Water doesn't infiltrate in clay soils regardless of what type of
Oh,
system
really?
you're
Okay,
using.
okay. Even if there's like a gravel bed that's.
It can't go through.
Can't go through it, okay,
Just can't get through the clay.
gotcha.
So the code does still provide for shared parking, which we've used on several applications over the past few years, where you have two or more uses on the same lot, but the demand for the uses varies. So like if you have a residential use and an office use on the same lot, the people that live there likely won't be there in the day when the office users are there, and then vice versa. So you're allowed to approve the joint use of parking spaces that are less than the total capacity that would otherwise be required by code.
Under legit, non-simultaneous uses.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a provision that discusses alternatives to providing parking spaces. One would be a conveyance of land. So where the planning board determines that because of either size limitations, dimensions, topography, et cetera, that an applicant in a business district where it's impractical to provide parking for either all or a portion of the otherwise required spaces, and there is land to give to the city, basically, the applicant can use that option to permanently dedicate use of their land to the city for commercial parking purposes. So that's one option. I don't think I've ever seen that provision utilized. I don't think I've ever seen that one utilized. But it's there.
Just in case.
Just in case. And then we have land bank parking, which you have used on applications in the past, where you can waive the initial improvement of the parking spaces up to 50% of the parking spaces. They have to be shown on the plan, but they can remain as green space until they're actually needed. And hopefully they're never actually needed, but they're
Yep.
planned out and mapped there in case they are.
Up to 50%, no more than 50%.
No more than 50%, yeah.
You answered one of my questions.
And then we get into the parking standards. So this is probably where the code has changed most significantly, to provide for parking maximums for all uses One of the things that you all commented on when you reviewed the draft was the provision in here that talked about a professional parking study and the use of that parking study to demonstrate what the appropriate number of parking spaces on the site would be. That provision is still in here. It's changed a little bit. It does say that any professional parking study submitted by the applicant shall be based primarily on specific site-related information, a comparable analysis of similar uses and properties in the area or region, and an examination of demand reduction strategies, including such elements as promotion of walking, bicycle parking, storage facilities, alternative mobility options, transit access opportunities, car share, ride share, or carpooling. So it gives you flexibility in reviewing these parking studies, but indicates that the parking study has to be based primarily on local numbers, not primarily based on the ITE standards, the national standards. You really want to see the local information. So with respect to the CMS district, the linkage district, and the waterfront development district, there is a maximum number of parking spaces that are allowed. And if you recall, in the old version of the code, in the parking schedule, you had a really specific list of uses. So, you know, restaurant would be one particular standard for parking, office, service uses. Now there's only there's 5 use categories instead of the pages upon pages of use categories. There's residential, lodging, commercial, healthcare and educational, and industrial. So for each of those 5 use types, there's a standard provided. For residential, it's 1 space per dwelling unit. Lodging is 3/4 of a space per guest room. Commercial is 3 spaces per 1,000 square feet of GFA. Healthcare and educational is 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of GFA. And industrial actually has no maximum. An applicant could come to you and propose less than what the maximum is, and it would be up to the planning board to determine is what the applicant's proposing as far as the number of parking spaces for each of those categories appropriate for that site and appropriate for the use. If the applicant proposes more than the maximum, they have to get a variance. If the applicant proposes something other than what you've determined is the appropriate number of spaces for that site and that use, they have to get a variance from that requirement that you have set. So it's much different than how we've looked at parking in the past.
So one of my questions in relationship to this maybe is this effectively takes out of play this whole waiver scenario we used to deploy.
Sort of, except you're kind of determining what the requirement is. So
That's then my next question,
Yeah.
right? So one would assume, you know, an applicant would come before us with, you know, what their approach to their parking needs are and have some basis for that. And
Yeah.
that it has to meet some form of, I guess, logic as determined by the planning board? Is there?
yeah, so there is sort of a standard. There's a lot of considerations, but it does say that the planning board shall determine the appropriate number of off-street parking spaces within the range provided in the table in the code. And it's based on the context of the property. And there's a whole list of considerations for you to think about when you're figuring out whether it's within the context of based on the context of the property. And that includes the size of the parcel, the proposed uses, existing buildings on the parcel, availability of public and street parking in the area, access to public transit. A parking study is something that you would consider, shared parking, land banking, ADA compliance, and input from a public hearing. So there's a lot of sources of
Yeah,
information
okay.
to think about when you're determining the standard. So we talked about the CMS, the linkage, and the waterfront development district as far as the maximums go. In all of the other zoning districts, so all your residential districts, the LI, the Fishkill Creek Development District, the general business, T district, there's a range. So there is a minimum number provided, but there's also a maximum. And within that range is where you would determine what the appropriate number of spaces is for that site. Let's see. What else is of note? I think that kind of hits the highlights of the local law. One other, actually, there's something that was added to the local law. This is not codified, but it's in the local law that was adopted. And that is the city council's request for a report from the planning board. So it says that the planning board is requested to provide a summary of the effects of implementation of this local law to the city council within 1, 2, and 3 years of adoption, and to provide this information, including but not limited to the number of applications in each zoning district, the required number of parking spaces for each application, the number of parking spaces an application would have been required to provide prior to this local law, so under the prior version of our code, and any other information that you deem relevant to the city council. So
I nominate Kevin to write that. I'm
So,
assuming we're tasking
this is
our-
something, that we'll have to, keep in mind as we're going through applications, and let's see, 1, 2, and 3 years after adoption. So next August, we'll have to send a report along to the city council that collects that data and provides that information to them.
Well, do we do that? Do we collect data on the projects that we have approved and have they been built?
Well, this is just the number of applications
The
that-
number of applications.
in each zoning district. So how many applications in the next year will you have reviewed in the T district? How many applications in the CMS? And then what the required number of parking spaces was for each of those, and what would it have been
Gotcha.
under the old code?
That's the part that would take some work.
Yeah.
It could be a little fuzzy, but I'm assuming we'll put in place a mechanism for that tracking mechanism.
Yeah, well, as staff.
If we
your
put
staff
something
and
in the minutes
consultants will
every time we
work
do
on
it.
that.
Me? Oh, I turned it off. I turned it off to cough, and I never turned it back on.
I love that idea of tracking
Yeah.
data, and we should probably make a habit of it. It exists, right? It just needs to be tracked and reported. I think it'd be really useful and instructive.
So good, you're going to write the report. I nominated.
If I had data.
Awesome. A real quick question. So we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about waivers. So that whole scenario is just different, and especially as it relates to this maximum provision.
Yeah, so like the waivers that you would see in the CMS district and the linkage district
kinda go
now,
away.
where, exactly, they're no longer
That's
in the
good.
code.
That's good.
Yeah.
And then my only other question, and you may have touched on it, but I'm not sure, and that's what sort of prompted the question, is just this concept of, as we've seen in other site-constricted applications in the past, this idea of off-site parking. Does anything change in the new law relative to this idea of, an applicant choosing within an 800-foot radius other possible options for parking for their development?
So the requirement is that it has to be on a contiguous site. If it's going to be off-site, it has to be a contiguous.
Oh, so it does change that.
Well, that wasn't an official, that was part of the process of justifying lower, right? Using a study to justify providing less parking on site.
Yeah, I guess. I'm assuming that mechanism was built into the law somehow. Right, I'm thinking of this recent
1113.
example. Yeah, 1113.
Right,
Oh,
we're looking at just the available.
Yeah, so they actually, they had the 1964 parking exemption. So they actually weren't, at the end of the day, because they had reduced the like, density, I'll call it, of the application, they got to the point where they qualified for the 1964 parking exemption. So I think they were providing 30 or so spaces on site.
Yeah.
That was more than they were actually required to provide. But then you had the analysis under the special permit of, is the use creating a parking issue, a burden on the local streets? And that's where the off-site locations came into play, because they had to demonstrate that there was sufficient parking in
Right.
the area to accommodate the
That happened on
use.
Schenck as well.
Yeah, it happened a few times.
It's a
Yeah.
simpler example.
So-
On Skink, there was no real space to put any parking,
Yep.
and they did the 800-foot radius
Which
analysis.
were quite
Right.
optimistic.
Yeah, it happened on Cross to some degree, too. So how does this new law then alter that potential scenario?
Because
future.
well, first of all, the 1964 parking exemption is gone.
Right?
And you basically set what the parking requirements are for the particular use on the particular site within that range.
Yep.
Whether it's 0 to the maximum in the CMS linkage and WD district, or within the prescribed range.
So then, for all
in the
intents
other
and purposes,
districts.
I guess what I'm hearing is that if the proposed parking, or at least the planning board and applicant determined appropriate amount of parking for the application isn't available on site,
Yeah.
then this concept of looking elsewhere for other parking to make up the requirement is now gone. Yes?
So, yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
They would have to seek a variance.
Thank you.
In that
That's
instance,
super
yeah,
helpful. Okay.
yeah.
That's very
That-
clear.
That is clear. That changes things quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's streamlined.
Yep,
Yeah,
yeah, it's good. Well, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other, before, we're at 7:30, but any other quick questions for Jennifer? Awesome. And I have to say, this is probably the first time in a long time the whole family's been together. Where we've actually had a full board. And we're unfortunately missing Natalie, but she's able to make a seat for you. So, Randall is not playing the role of our city planner tonight. He is, however, I think, one of the longest-serving, senior-most planning board members in the city of Beacon. It's good to see you, Randall. Anyway, welcome all to the September 2024 meeting of the City of Beacon Planning Board. We have a few administrative items to get through. We were not able to approve minutes going back to July, so we're going to start with July. We don't have August, so we're going to hold that over to next month's approval. June and July. So, I don't imagine for June we have any other further input or comments or modifications. So with that, I'll accept a motion to adopt into the record the June 11, 2024 minutes of our meeting. Motion by Randall,
Second.
second by David.
Yes.
Was that you?
Yes.
Okay. You guys are like throwing voices back here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then we will do the same with July. No further notes or modifications? Then I'll accept a motion to approve into the record our July 2024 minutes of our meeting.
Motion.
Motion by Karen, second?
Second?
Second by, that was Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
You abstain?
I wasn't here.
Oh, thank you.
I abstained for June.
Okay. Got it? Okay, so then with that, we're going to go to our first regular meeting agenda item, and that is public hearing and continued review of application for site plan approval, accessory dwelling unit, 16 Rock Hill Road, submitted by Donna Scheisel. I hope I pronounced that name right. Scheisel. Good evening.
Hi. I don't know whether I'm asking you questions or you're asking me.
Well, let's see, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of give us an update on,
So you had asked me a few questions, and I had answered them all, submitted them to Mercedes, who
Yep.
has done whatever she has to do.
okay, yeah, and to that end, on behalf of our city planner, and based on her review of your responses to her observations and questions, she has determined that as far as the apartment size, the site plan as proposed meets the above requirements. And as far as occupancy, it is recommended that these requirements be added to the final resolution as conditions of approval. So we do have a draft resolution incorporating.
Chair, it might be helpful for any members of the public that are here for the public hearing or listening, just to have a quick, like, couple sentence summary of what the application is.
I think that's a great idea, and I'll ask the applicant then to just, if you could, just kind of describe for us into the microphone.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
have a, I guess, standalone garage that's going to be turned into an accessory or what is it called? Accessory apartment, I don't know what the ADU. And it's a one-bedroom type of thing, small. I live in the other house, and part of the description they were looking for is that it was owner occupied the house and the garage is the apartment. They wanted that specified. I don't know what else you were asking me for. That was pretty much the biggest question, was who was living where.
Yeah, yeah, again, so it's a ADU.
Correct.
Separate.
And it's not short-term, it's a regular rental. It's not a short-term apartment. It's not a Airbnb.
Yes, understood. And this is, again, an existing building currently on your property.
Right, there's no change to the outside, other than I'm changing the windows.
Yep.
Updating the windows, but there's no change to the outside of the building.
Yep, good.
And Chairman, one other point, motion to open the public hearing.
Oh, darn
Yeah.
it. I always forget that. Yeah, so forgive me. I should have done that before we started your description, but anyway, I'll accept a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion.
Motion by Karen,
Second?
second by Kevin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. So that takes
So
care
we're
of
all
that.
set?
So just real quick, I just summarized our planner's review, and at this point, your application is in good shape. Mr. Russo, any other observations you want to share?
No, I had no further comments at this time.
Yeah. Great. And then, so at this point, we'll go to the public. We are in open public hearing for any members of our audience who are here to offer their thoughts or comments on this application. It doesn't appear there are any. I will accept a motion to close the public hearing. Motion by Karen,
Seconded by Len.
second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
That's probably the shortest public hearing in history. And then again, with that, we have a draft resolution to either discuss or otherwise move straight to adopting. So I'm assuming as drafted is in order.
Yeah, so we do have a draft resolution that you directed at your last meeting, and it does include the two conditions that Natalie had recommended be included in the resolution. That is, the accessory apartment shall not be used for short-term rentals, and that the owner of the lot has to occupy at least one of the dwelling units, either the apartment or the main dwelling.
Good. Great. With that, any questions or comments around the board?
Does it make sense to actually include those conditions? I mean, what if the laws change?
They are in the resolution.
Yeah, I mean, does it make sense to not include them? Meaning, what if the laws change and the city passes a law allowing short-term rentals?
It's the law of the land right now, so if they change, then
They can come back to seek an amendment.
We've
the
required notes
resolution.
stating that in
Yeah.
all other applications previously.
Yeah.
All right?
okay, so, anything else? Okay, motion to adopt the resolution? All set? Motion by Randall,
Second.
second by Karen, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we might just make it to get home for the debate.
Oh, God, no. I don't know which is, I think this is favorable. I think a 5-hour planning board meeting.
Yeah, really? You'd take a 5-hour planning meeting over a debate?
Yeah, definitely.
Great. And we're going to move to item 2 on our agenda. Public hearing and continued review of application for site plan approval, 19 Henry Street Townhomes, submitted by Lori Joseph Builders. I won't make the same mistake again. Motion to open the public hearing.
Motion.
Motion by David,
Second.
second by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant. Tonight I'm joined by our project engineer. I was going to say Dan Kohler, but it's Mike Bodendorf. So for the record, as the chairman mentioned, we are here before you for our public hearing for a proposed 4 units and a 2-story attached townhouse located at 19 Henry Street. For the record, the public hearing notices and the signage for the public hearing for tonight have been put out and otherwise mailed out. As this is the first public hearing for the project, if I may, I'll do a brief background. I know there's like a boxing match or something later tonight, so I know you want to get out of here. So with that, the premises is presently classified in the T or transitional zoning district, and it abuts the R15 zoning district as well as the CMS zoning district. And the property is not classified in the HDLO district. The surrounding area is a mix of commercial, residential, and not-for-profit uses, which includes local businesses, a dentist, former automobile repair shop at 5 Henry Street that's proposed to be redeveloped into the Garage Work Studios. We understand that is being redeveloped for community programming and workshops and event space. Across the street, of course, is the city parking lots behind the rear of the Main Street commercial and retail uses, and the premises is presently improved with residence and accessory structures. The applicant is proposing to demolish those structures for the project. As mentioned, we're proposing to construct 4 attached 2-story townhouses for a total of 4 residential units with 1-car garages. A second parking space is provided in front of each of those garages. The project is designed in recognition and furtherance of the transition between Main Street and the surrounding mixed-use residential neighborhoods in the city and maintains the community character in this corridor. In response to comments and feedback throughout the project, we have revised the project as follows. The design of the townhouses has been updated to adopt the Victorian architectural style for each of the units, with certain traditional design elements such as bay windows that vary to slightly distinguish each unit and provide them with unique characteristics while maintaining coherent aesthetic throughout the development. We also updated the site plan to include 2 refuse containers within the respective garages. We replaced the existing wide sidewalk to its full 8.5-foot width. We added a detail for the monolithic curb and sidewalk detail, and we did update the driveway apron to reflect the portion of the sidewalk intended for pedestrian travel with a level grade to help for ADA access and function. Procedurally, the instant application has been designed to be zoning compliant, so there's no variances sought before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And then again, before I turn it over to Mr. Bodendorf, I would flag 2 additional project updates. First, the townhouse, since we last were before you, we moved the townhouses up towards the street again, an additional 3.5 feet, which further reduces the length of the driveways and the garage to 20 feet. So we did further reduce, that was a mention of the board and the planner throughout her comment memos. And second, the applicant changed the side elevations again on the townhouses in response to the board's comments at your August meeting. These changes included 2 additional windows, 1 on each level on the left side elevation and 4 windows to the right side elevation. So 2 on each level nearest to the front facade. So we did add some windows there. Lastly, the city did adopt changes to the T district, specifically applicable to townhouse developments. So those were recently before you all on referral from the City Council. Through that revision, the dimensional requirements for townhouses are now consistent with what you would have in the RD. It's kind of one of those leftover districts that allow the use but didn't get updated in that big code update a few years ago with John Clark. So that acts to obviate certain variances that you might otherwise see for a single-family residential home as distinct from a townhouse project. So we did amend our application recently. We submitted that as the city only last week adopted its zoning change to include a request for a 4-lot subdivision, which would function for the townhouses. So Jennifer Gray gave us a bit of a tidbit. It hasn't yet been, while the law has been adopted, it hasn't been filed with the Secretary of State. So it's right there, and we will.
It's just,
Cuddy and Fader,
it's just a baby law at this point.
That's right. The Cuddy and Fader, get on the clerk train will be starting tomorrow, right at 9 a.m. So, Ben, hope you're watching at home in any event. So with that, I'll ask quickly to have Mr. Bodendorf just walk you through the site plan for the benefit of the public and answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. For the record, Mike Bodendorf, engineer for the applicant. So this is a proposal for 4 townhomes, and I'll just do a brief overview of how utilities will be connected. Each townhome will have its own water and sewer connection to the city sewer and water systems. That includes gas and electric. As Taylor mentioned, we are now proposing a 4-lot subdivision under the new code. So all the utilities for each lot will be on its own lot, so there'll be no need for easements across lots. Drainage will be collected via an underground drainage system that sort of surrounds the building that will collect any roof leaders and any extra yard drains that we may need to add during construction if we find an issue with drainage. That's generally it. I can go into more detail about impervious and so forth, but probably bore everybody.
I love a good robust conversation about pervious versus impervious surfaces and runoff. Thank you. Anything else? Great. Just real quick, our planners review her, and I'm sure obviously the applicant is in receipt. Her latest review, quote, all comments from my previous memos to the planning board have been addressed. The site plan as proposed is code compliant and acceptable from a planning perspective. And lo and behold, Mr. Russo, your review offers pretty much the same.
Correct.
All comments have been addressed. Great. With that, we will then now go to first the board. Any questions of the applicant?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
The stormwater, the drainage, is that going to be used in common for all 4 lots under the subdivision scheme, or will each individual lot have its own stormwater controls?
Well, there is a stormwater line that crosses the lots in front of the building. So that would be a common line.
Yeah, okay.
Easements and maintenance agreements.
Yeah.
One other flag on the fly out there, just because it's on the screen, there will also be an easement around the building so that people won't have to drag their lawnmower through the building. So there will be pedestrian access around, but not shared infrastructure, not shared resources. You're not going to be able to picnic in each other's yards. It's not a shared common area,
Yep.
so not like an HOA function.
So with this new subdivision element,
Yep.
you're going to be submitting an updated
Yes,
site
we'll
plan
include all of that on the plat.
reflecting all of this stuff on the plan.
Mr.
Yes.
Russo won't let us get away with that.
Of course he will. Yeah, okay, good, thanks. That answers your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions by the board of the applicant? Observations? Comments? We'll go to the public then. Anyone here from the public who would like to share their thoughts on this particular application? Sorry? Yes, this is for 19 Henry. Was that your question?
My name is Carl Schaefer. I live at 86 Catherine Street. I'm behind where this proposed development is. I'd like to know if they've considered the effect on the swamp area. That's a very swampy area there. And when you're putting in construction like that, you're going to have displacement of water where it would have gone there normally. So that's a question I have. Has that been considered? Because it will back up into the backyards on Catherine Street and also the homes around it. Right now, whenever you have a heavy rain in my backyard and in others, there was a swampy area. So this is only going to accentuate it because the construction will no longer have the land to absorb the water. Another observation, it has a very, very majestic tree. And I'm wondering, will that tree remain?
We'll collect questions and then we'll ask,
Pardon?
we'll collect questions and then we'll ask the applicant to address the
In
questions.
other words,
as
I
they
was
come in.
wondering if the tree will be cut down or whether it will remain.
Understood. Thank you. We'll take your question, and then when all folks have had the opportunity to share their thoughts or even ask additional questions, then we'll ask the applicant to come back up and address those questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the reason is because a tree that large, it's been over there over 50, 60 years, provides oxygen for the area. And trees are very valuable assets. And I would like to know whether or not if that tree will be taken down, which I hope it isn't, it will be replaced with others.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Matt Keaveney. I live at 94 Catherine Street, directly behind where this building is going up. I'm very concerned about additional noise, and I'm pretty much going to lose any sense of privacy, because that's going to be the only thing I'm going to be able to see out my back door or any of my windows. Right now, the plan calls for 4 oak trees, but that's going to take over a decade before they provide any meaningful cover. I mean, is there any, I guess what my question is there any possibility of getting some kind of better privacy screen between my property and this, giant building that's going up?
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. You've heard some questions and some comments from the public. You're welcome to address those. Thank you.
So the first commenter, I believe, was concerned about stormwater and removal of trees and what's going on there now with stormwater and during heavy rains and so forth. We are proposing a drainage system on this site. We're collecting all of the roof runoff into that drainage system. Runoff from driveways will sheet out to the road. So essentially, none of the runoff from this new building will be contributing to the backyard. It'll be into our drainage system, out to the street drainage system, whereas now there is a house there. Some of the roof leaders discharge towards the front, some roof leaders discharge towards the back. So essentially, we're taking impervious away from the contribution to surface runoff in the backyard.
So the backyard, again, though we did some back and forth on this and discussed potentially adding impervious surface to the backyard.
Right.
That is not the case now. It remains a grassed area.
Correct.
Landscaped area. And what I'm hearing is, and again, I'm very familiar also, I live over on Rombout, probably directly in line with this. It is very low lying, and it does get, when there is quite a bit of heavy rain, saturated to the point of yards turning into lakes for a short period of time. So I'm very familiar with this. So what you're saying is that you're obviously, as you're required to do, any runoff coming from roof is being directed by leaders toward this system and toward the front of the property.
Correct. And into the closed city drainage system.
Gotcha, exactly. Yep.
And then regarding, was it screening?
The first question was the large, mature, beautiful tree, of which there are many in that area. But yeah, there's one obviously associated with your property. How is that being handled?
We have to remove one tree that's up near the front of the dwelling. We haven't identified other larger trees than 6 inches on the site to be removed, I don't believe. We can certainly plant evergreens instead of the deciduous trees in the backyard. That will help with screening, if that's something that would be palatable.
Yeah, I think as with any application like this, where, you know, you've got a difference in height, right?
Yeah.
Where, you know, you have the ability of potentially folks in the new development at the upper story looking down over the backyards of their neighbors who are single story. Yeah, as much as I love oaks, they do drop, right? So, and it does take a while for them to get to the point where they provide,
Right.
even with leaves, the amount of visual screening. So I don't know, other board members have any thoughts? I think evergreen would be more appropriate, and a tall growing evergreen. But again, I'm not an arborist, so I don't know necessarily what the right species is to get that balance where you have height without necessarily too much bulk.
Right.
So I would propose that you come back with a recommendation.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on that, Karen? Or anyone else? I look to you because you know plants.
I would agree. I think, given the comments of your neighbors, that some evergreen screening would probably be welcomed. The oaks, as they were specified on the plan, are exceedingly small. They're not given a caliper size, they're given a height, a 6-foot height, so that could be very small indeed. I would look at the Niagara arborvitae is a native species, actually. It provides good coverage, fairly quick growth.
Fast growing.
You talking about thujas?
Yeah, the Occidentalis.
Yep.
Niagara.
She knows
I
her
love it.
stuff. Wow. I would have just said big, tall, and green. Great. And then, okay, I think at least as far as runoff, tree removals, and privacy screening, thank you. Anything else by the board? I think you're probably poised to ask us for something or other, so I'll let you do that, and then we'll get to any further
I'll save the
questions.
request to jump the extensions ahead, but for now, for this application.
Don't push your luck.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, that the board sees fit in directing the planning board attorney to potentially prepare seeker documentation and/or
Yes.
potentially either site plan draft resolutions to be considered. That would be our ask for tonight.
Yep. And
One other piece, sorry to interrupt, also keeping open the public hearing.
Exactly. I was gonna say,
To next
yeah,
month, we
good.
will, the third ask, so to speak, I guess, would be to authorize, subject to the city filing with the Secretary of State, the local law, the subdivision public hearing as well. So this will be a joint site plan and subdivision hearing, re-noticed, so the neighbors will also receive a new notice
Yep.
for next month.
So,
Kind of a backwards ask.
leave it to you.
It's better than ask backwards.
So, that was 4 things or 3? I got secret request.
Yes.
I got, yes, we will definitely leave the public hearing open, so
Yes.
that takes care of that one. And then draft resolution on site plan
And seeker.
and subdivision? Well, we got to do secret first.
She's shaking her head, no, just site, yeah, just
exactly.
site plan.
I was going
yeah.
to say, he's asking for a lot.
Yeah,
I
no,
gotta
just
get it in
just
order
site
here.
plan, and then, of course, the subdivision would be.
Let's take it one at a time. All right. So, as far as secret, yes, I think we can certainly talk about that. Any objections or otherwise thoughts around authorizing Jen's office to draft secret documents?
Seems reasonable.
I'll accept the motion to do so then. Motion by Randall.
Second.
Second by Karen. All in favor? Aye. All right. What was the next thing? Motion by Randall? Yeah.
Second was keeping open the public hearing and authorizing, setting, so to speak, the public hearing for the subdivision component. So it's a joint hearing. So we'll have to renotice, republish.
Yeah. So we'll definitely, I don't know, do we have to act on keeping the hearing open? We're just going to keep it open.
Keep it open.
Right. And then the sub-part B to that is noticing subdivision.
Subject to the city filing. It's,
It's a little early for that, because we haven't even seen the subdivision.
well, we submitted a plat. We did submit the plat for the 4 lots.
It's not in our packet.
And we submitted the application form too with the fees and paid the escrow.
Just got it,
We just got it.
though. Friday, was it?
You didn't meet the window, buddy.
Well, the
So
law
yes,
was
you
adopted on
submitted it.
Monday.
Technically, you submitted it, but it
So we're
hasn't-
hoping, but the hearing would be continued even if it weren't. So we're asking just, it's part of the process. This is, the comments would be consistent for site plan and subdivision, so.
Any objections to noticing public hearing for subdivision next month?
If you are going to do it, I would recommend that it be conditioned on at least the local law having been filed.
Well,
So that
sure.
it is
Yeah, makes sense.
effective.
Yeah.
To allow for what it is. I mean, look, they could request the subdivision and seek variances for all the lot line setbacks and the lot size, absent, even if the local law didn't exist. That's obviously not what they intend. So I would have the public hearing be conditioned
Conditioned,
on the
sure.
filing of that local law, which I think will happen before they have to notice for the public hearing.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't be a concern, but
Threading the needle here.
Ben and Amanda, we're coming for you.
So, board, any objections, or otherwise, I'll accept a motion to authorize notice for site plan public hearing for next month's subdivision, excuse me, condition, on the condition that the law has actually passed at the clerk's office, excuse me.
Motion to conditionally have a subdivision's public meeting, public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Len, second by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Anything else?
Last
And no,
one.
we're not going to push those up.
No, it was the site plan draft, potentially. That was the only other ask. Was it the
Draft
Draft
resolution
resolution for consideration.
for
that-
site plan?
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend that you move forward with actually adopting that site plan resolution at your next meeting, given that there's also a subdivision component that's forthcoming.
That's the one that's a little tricky.
So it's not going to save any time, it's not going to streamline anything. So
Let's wait for the draft.
we're happy to draft it twice. We're just going to have to add the subdivision part too.
You're
but
just making
it's-
you're just making the town
trying
taxpayers
to,
pay more
you know,
money.
Keep everybody busy.
I think Jim's busy enough.
Busy enough, thank you.
Anything
Thank you.
else?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Good. Look at that. It's 8 o'clock.
The T district.
See, I'm keeping to my timetable,
We'll see.
even without rushing.
Slow
We'll
your
see.
roll, slow your roll. I don't want to get home for that nonsense. I know. I just can't listen to it.
I know. Okay, so that takes us to item number 3, continued review of application for site plan and subdivision approval, mixed-use commercial and residential, 45 Beekman Street, High Street and High Street, submitted by Beekman Arts Center and Bay Ridge Studios LLC. Welcome back.
Before we get started, Donna.
I have
Yes,
to
Donna has to
recuse
recuse.
myself, so
you.
I'm going now.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be out there.
Try not to miss you too much, and we'll make
call
sure we
for
let
you.
you know when we're back.
Wake me up.
Yeah.
Just when you thought we had a full house.
Yeah, well, they all fly the coop at some point. Good evening.
You want to begin?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening. For the record, Taylor Palmer with the law firm of Cuddy and Fader on behalf of the applicant. Tonight, I'm appearing in connection with our continued review of the subdivision and site plan proposal for a two 4-story mixed-use commercial and multifamily residential buildings at 45 Beekman and High Street. I am joined by our project architect, R.A. Siegel, the project engineer, Justin Dates, and Phil Greeley, both from Colliers Engineering and Design. We just discussed last month in August. The purpose of tonight's presentation is really to flesh out the remaining details for the visual aspects, as already is up on the screen, provide further information to your board in connection with the environmental seeker review for the project. Our request tonight really is pretty straightforward. We're just asking that at this time the board consider referring us to the architectural review subcommittee. Quickly, I'll just touch on some points of information from our last submission. As Arya will more fully discuss when he goes through his visuals, we did provide some additional design options in our supplemental submission. Then we further supplemented those with some photorealistic renderings because we know we had to be here tonight with those. Those are an important part of this process, and we wanted to make sure to get those to you all. So these images provide additional building facade design options for the Beekman Street building, in addition to facade design options for the High Street building. So our Beekman building is updated to open the corner of the building on the 9D in Beekman Street to provide heightened pedestrian accessibility and interest for pedestrians. We updated the proportions of the arched openings along the first floor facade walkway to provide additional light. We adjusted the facade of the first floor brick and setback on the fourth floor to include glass and aluminum frames. As noticed, more detailed in our Exhibit B, which is in our formal submission to you for the deadline. The lighter material is supported by the first floor brick and assists visually lighting the building, and the railings on the roof deck have been updated to match and enhance the lighter facade. Our submission also includes alternative design discussion for the planning board showing the arcade openings made of steel, framed opening in place of the original arch opening. So we have some alternatives that we've incorporated into that, and now, of course, the photorealistic renderings. In our August 27th submission, we also included a revised site plan set, which was prepared by Colliers. Justin will review with you all briefly in just a moment. The revisions to the set really related to stormwater, sewer, erosion control facilities. There were some lighting plan updates to ensure a decrease in a potential lighting hotspot. But again, really, we're just trying to work to address more specifics to Mr. Russo's memo from prior comments. By way of brief update, just for the DOT elephant that still remains in the room, we did have a meeting with DOT staffers on August 22nd, and Mr. Greeley may touch on this in just a minute. But we are moving forward for DOT purposes very quickly. They've been very responsive, and we're fortunate to have Colliers pushing that for us. So the right-of-way discussion, it's with their mapping division. Once they confirm and we understand, we'll have that confirmation this week that they, whether DOT or agrees with our title company that we own a certain parcel that we don't need to get from DOT or otherwise. We expect that to be this week, at which point they'd put it on to move it forward to, quote, conceptual legal approval of the request. So we're moving forward with pretty good expediency from a DOT perspective, but of course the lawyers involved. We will continue to provide you all with those updates. So with that, I know we all love a good debate, and I'm going to turn it over to Phil to quickly touch base, because as you all just discussed during your work session, there have been changes to your parking regulations, but this project has been designed to consider those as we've been developing the site plan. So very quickly with that, Justin will quickly hit on stormwater, and then Aryeh will leave you all with some fun for A or B.
Good evening, Philip Greeley from Colliers. In terms of the surplus land, the next step would be, once we receive that conceptual approval, it will proceed to Albany. So that process is moving along. That's for the property along Beekman Street. We also have been trying to get a technical meeting with DOT, so that there's two groups of DOT. That's really the right-of-way and real estate people that are dealing with the land. Then we have the technical and operations people that are reviewing the traffic study and the mitigation measures that we've proposed. So we had a meeting scheduled that had to be postponed because they couldn't get all the staff together. So hopefully we will have that shortly. As part of our last meeting, for those members that aren't here, we had prepared a plan showing the feasibility of a right turn lane southbound on 9D turning onto Beekman Street, that there would still be plenty of right-of-way available to accommodate the reconstruction of the sidewalk, the lane, and areas for landscaping, etc. We have also identified in the traffic study some mitigation measures for the signal at Beekman Street, which would also tie into coordination with improvements at Verplank and 9D also, in terms of signal phasing modifications and signal timing improvements. New York State DOT initial discussion was what they were going to look at, whether or not they wanted us to pursue adaptive traffic control. So similar to what they've done at the interchange, which is still working. Not when there's an accident and sun glare. The system broke down. Yeah.
Is that an accident tonight?
It was an accident, and part of the issue was sun glare. I think that was involved with that. So, yeah, traffic was at a standstill this evening. In any event, the adaptive system, we're waiting for DOT to give us direction on that. At the last meeting, I believe the chairman asked for some simulations of what the difference would be with the mitigation that we identified compared to what it would be without. We're working on those. Again, we need some of DOT's input to finalize those. So that's kind of a summary of where we are right now.
Okay.
And answer any questions if you like.
Great. Any questions of traffic by the board at the moment?
Definitely looking forward to, and I think the whole city would love to see some improvement on the intersection.
Yep.
So,
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Good evening, Board. Justin Dates, Colliers Engineering and Design. Just touch on some of the modifications to the site plans real quick. We responded to Mr. Russo's comments letters from July. There was some cleanup of items, erosion control, some stormwater, catch basin reveals on the curb inlets, things like that nature that we cleaned up. We've also been pursuing dye tests on the residential parcels on High Street and Tompkins Ave in coordination with the city's water sewer department. So we did conduct dye test on 20 and 22 High Street. Neither of those confirmed any connection to the sanitary sewer within the project site. So we assume that, but we've conducted the test and checked the box on those two. We anticipate our next dye test will be on 7 Tompkins, which is the one that we think may connect to the sewer that runs through the site. We also did a dye test on the existing sump pump in the basement of the 45 Beekman building. That we ran that a couple of times with City Witness. It didn't go into the sewer system, so we think that there may be a dry well of some sort on site that's pumping to. So we're going to update the I&I report as such and resubmit to the board. We also modified the lighting plan, site lighting plan in our set. There's a prior hotspot area that Mr. Russo noted. We have all LED light fixtures. We did decrease all of them from their lumen output to help better reduce those hot spots and make them more uniform illumination level across the site and in compliance with the city zoning. One landscape modification that we did do based on the city planner's comments is we did add a screening row of evergreens along our western property line, which is adjacent to that 7 Tompkins. We added a screen row of evergreens just along that as a buffer between that residence and that site driveway. So, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, board? Thank you.
Good evening.
Evening.
So I think one of the few points of my presentation that Taylor didn't mention was that we revised the area in front of the buildings. So the pedestrian clearway is a consistent 8-foot width. And then there's varying widths of the building transition zone. So, and that's something that Natalie asked for. So we took care of that. But basically, I think Taylor touched on a lot of the points, but I'll just go through my list here. So the idea is to create civic-scale buildings that fit into the site and the urban setting around it. The design reflects elements of buildings in the neighborhood and treats them in a more modern way, which is part of what the L District regulations call out. There's a combination.
You're getting a signal from the engineer.
Oh, okay.
Can't hear you.
All right.
Thank you.
Here, let me get the image up. There's a combination of glass facade, some of which is projected beyond the main face of the building, like a bay window idea, along with brick elements that create a balance of visual weight and rhythm. The tower is now all glass, which lightens the corner and accentuates that visible intersection with a recognizable element. The setback fourth floor is also glass, which is, it'll reflect the sky and visually recede when you look at it from the ground level. And that's 15 feet back. We adjusted some of the proportions in each building. And then the buildings, let me get the other one up there. They're related through the arcade and the use of the brick and glass in a similar way, but the High Street building's treated a little bit differently. It's scaled down a little bit and has those pitched roofs at the fourth floor to help tie into the residential properties further up High Street. So that's basically where we were from the last time we showed it to you, and just wanted to get some more feedback and see if we could start getting into the more of the details with the ARB.
ARB, yeah. I'm not sure, do we have an ARB scheduled yet? So I don't think we do. Yeah. We can. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so we'll talk about how we do that once we talk about recommending this applicant to the ARB. So you're going to go up and look? Okay. Yeah, actually, for some reason, this wasn't able to open on my computer. And I do have a question. That low wall, and maybe right along in this near building, and maybe since he's up there, Kevin can point to it. Right against the street, the low wall. Yeah. Is that in fact a wall right there at the sidewalk?
No. Yeah. I mean, what we're
is.
doing
Yeah,
in order to deal with the slope of the sidewalk there and maintain a consistent first floor, we're coming in further up the street.
And that's all residential?
The
No.
first floor is commercial.
Commercial.
Yeah.
Is that meant to be a continuous connected arcade?
Yeah.
Experience from both buildings?
Yeah.
Do you think that you might want to?
Kevin, it's unfortunately we can't hear you, and you're not going to be on the record. So
Just, I think you were probably seeing this as having a stair or some sort of connection where you could continue that, if you wanted to walk. It's now sort of a cul-de-sac without a set of stairs or something taking you back down to continue.
Oh, yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah, we have those stairs on the other building, but we haven't worked that out yet.
There's a lot of details. Yeah, and I'm not.
Yeah, no, that should do that, so you can come out that way.
And we can save some of this.
yeah, I think a lot of this can be discussed and addressed during ARB. Go ahead.
What do we think about the corner feature on the Beekman Street building? I mean, that was one of the comments I know in Natalie's review, and I realize this is going to Architectural Review Board, but this is like across the street from City Hall and everything. It seems like that's kind of a fairly,
Yeah, well, I'll put it this way. So yes, the ARB needs to spend the type of focus time that the ARB needs to spend with its applicant. But for those of us who aren't on the ARB, now is our opportunity to offer our observations.
I feel like that corner thing should be bigger.
Yeah, so just really quickly, we'll get to that because that's on my list. And again, I've been talking about this from day one, is this concept of how this building in its entirety along that Beekman experience engages the pedestrian. And as it gets to that second building down Beekman, and you're walking along and you're experiencing a wall coming up as you go down, to me it's uninviting. It doesn't speak to an interaction between this building and the experience of making your way along the sidewalk. It's again, It's anywhere, any town, USA, mediocre architecture, and I'm so sorry to say this, REA, but it is. And it is this, I'll say it again, because I keep saying it at every meeting. This opportunity is a huge opportunity for this applicant as a member of this community to make the environment, to form the environment, to make a significant impact. Where currently it's very minimal, it's soft, it's trees, this is a huge change to this corner and to this whole experience going down Beekman as a pedestrian. And again, I'm gonna be honest, to me, it's just a mishmash of forms that have no context, no relationship, other than the fact that there's some brick and there's some metal. And, you know, this idea of the experience of this building and the experience of the people viewing it, walking along it, it's just meh. So again, it's one citizen and one planning board member's opinion of this, but my God, what a missed opportunity if this is what ends up getting built.
Yeah. We certainly appreciate that, and this has come a long way from the beginning. We're trying to incorporate these details. You know, this is our first photorealistic rendering. We wanted to make sure that you all could we need these comments because that's what this applicant has been working to do. They hear you, they go right into it.
Yeah,
Every time we've gotten feedback,
I get
we
it. I
employ
know
it.
it. I know because I'm in this profession. I know how challenging it is to meet all of the, you know, different myriad requirements of the client, of the budget, of the site.
Well, if I may, this one actually is
not
more
easy.
of the linkage district's design. So we are certainly working to do that. We're going so far as to quite literally try and get the DOT to give us land to make this project better.
Of course. I'm not,
Right.
I'm not,
So just
I'm
wanna-
not
but I want to expect that process is
diminishing
very
any of
expensive.
that.
So you just want to be clear that to say that this design isn't doing that is not necessarily fair, given what the existing conditions on the side are, which would have set this building back significantly from the lot line. So I
Listen to
wanna-
me.
yeah.
I get what you're saying, but in no way are you going to be able to convince me that because there are DOT constraints or requirements and the linkage district says XYZ, that means you can't create great architecture.
No question.
Period. That's
Yep.
all I'm saying.
I appreciate that, but I do, for the record, because it's community character you're speaking to, this building has been designed and brought up to the frontage and has gone through significant iterations and updates.
I'm
to
not arguing
take land
that.
and bring it to the frontage. So we've
And I'm not,
done toward
I'm
the
not
linkages
saying that
goals.
you should otherwise do something different, and especially because it's coming up, right up to the sidewalk. That's more of the reason why this should be looked at very closely for
Agreed.
the impact that it's making.
Right, and we've done an initial landscaping plan, and I think that'll help evolve this too, because like you said, there's got to be interactions, there's got to be those interplays. So when you get into,
I'll also posit that no amount of landscaping is going to help make mediocre architecture. So thank you, I appreciate your comments, and I understand what you're doing, right? But again, please don't take my comments as a complete, you know, damnation of the entire project. I understand how challenging this is. I understand how much work this takes and what goes into it. I just want to make sure that the applicant knows that there's still some work to do, and that you've heard from at least one planning board member and at least one citizen loud and clear about what, you know, this neighbor of mine is proposing.
understood, and we
Simple.
appreciate that input, and of course, that's why we're here, we need that. And part of what we're going to do in our supplemental too, is we are working towards an additional sort of angle, because you do need to see its interplay, as you mentioned, with the new firehouse, with the city hall, all of the buildings that are here, the commercial and the mixed use and the residential, all around us. So this building isn't designed in a vacuum, and it is to work to incorporate that, but I know REA will be in the lab and
Good.
putting it all in.
Thank you. Again, I'm saying all this now because I'm not on the ARB, so you unfortunately have to sit here and listen to me.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah, please.
REA, you started out your presentation describing that you were looking to evoke some elements common to some of the existing buildings in the area. It would help us, I think, to prepare for the ARB, if you could just make some specific references, just tell us a little bit about what you were looking to key off of.
Yeah.
I mean, if you are comfortable talking about that at all now, or do you want to wait until you make that ARB presentation?
I mean, it might be good to have examples with images instead of just describing it.
You know, the other thing I was thinking in reaction to this, just looking at this and the use of a lot of glass, is that in combination with a pedestrian arcade, I wonder if there was an opportunity. You know, a couple places I've been, like where I went to school in Ann Arbor, there was a pedestrian arcade that had a very sort of glass conservatory structure associated as part of it, that had some details, or, you know, some mullions or metalwork that was evocative of a time period that may be, you know, contemporary with some of the other architectural elements. And I wonder if there is a way to play off of that glass tower with some features that would, you know, it might be interesting to look at evoking something like that, and it might be one way of inspiring something that would suddenly, you know, start to complement some of the historic buildings around it in a way that that would create some real aesthetic. You know, and I was curious if that was, if some of the use of glass, if you were thinking anything along those kinds of structures, or had thought about that, like some of these kind of big Victorian conservatory structures. And
Specifically in the detailing of the tower, or the
or is it, you know, I guess I'm looking forward to just kind of hearing a you know, kind of a little bit more about the overall theme and what you're trying to evoke with the tower feature, and the sort of reliance on quite a bit of glass, and, you know, what can be done to create the kind of impact I think that John is trying to search for, you know, in terms of the significance of the location. So I'm just tossing some thoughts out to see how, you know, and if you want to mold over or reflect anything back, you know.
Can I?
Yeah,
I'll
please.
make it short, because I'll
Sure.
have other opportunities, and I'm sure this will evolve. But, I mean, one of the things that's striking to me is the contrast between some of the elements, like the arcade and the brick parts, and the darkness of the glass, right? That's just compositional. We're just looking at that as an image, right? But they're like buttoned up against each other, and there isn't overlap or a transition or a family resemblance between them, even if they're different materials, right? Like, they're like different. If you're going to use radically different elements or materials, right, sometimes you want to accentuate that if you're doing it like a creative thing, right? Or what you want to do is show that there's a family resemblance between them, that they were built at the same time and they have some common either structural or design idea behind them. What's happening now is it looks like two different things are happening and they're not really talking to each other. And so that's, I think, one of the ways you could improve this. There are also other things about proportion and material and other things that you could probably work on, but that's one of the things you could start with, like the big picture, I think, is having it more integral while still doing the job of breaking up that massive, because if it was all brick, it would be this massive warehouse, and it would really be, and that's why we have those rules about that. That's one of the clear things. And you're breaking it up with the different materials, which is good, but they're still sort of, I think, not related.
And I think it would be maybe risky to look at making the tower any more massive than it is, because I think you run into something that starts to look like the Armory building in Poughkeepsie, where it's got this immense, you know, corner tower, and it sort of starts to, you know, challenge the rest of the structure. I don't think I would make it any more
Plus,
massive
it's
than
super
it is.
risky. When you're doing something really attention-getting, you have to really hit the landing. You know, you gotta land it, and especially early on, it's tough to. It's tough to make that happen sometimes.
We're talking about consistency, but I mean, the one thing is like, given the location of this building, kind of want it to stand out a little bit, frankly. I mean, we don't want it to just be a nondescript office
Definitely not.
building.
It should be something that is inspiring. I will definitely research some references based on what I'm talking about, because I think there are design cues out there for the combination of materials and even the related to the kind of use.
Cool. So ARB, I think, yeah, it sounds like there's plenty to go on to, continue the more in-depth review with the Architectural Review Board. So,
I have one question
Yeah,
about the site and the landscaping. There's the area that I guess is the right-of-way still for the state that is shown as grass. And right now, it's a bit of an overgrown hillside with a lot of trees. And I'm wondering if in your conversations with the state, whether there's an opportunity to use that space in a landscaped way, even though it's a right-of-way? Like, can we do something more than grass?
We can look at that corner. We do have the sidewalk, we have some bollard lighting, that connects through there. And we could add some landscaping along that frontage. There would be a use and occupancy permit that we would need from DOT, but we've already started. We have some things in there right now that would trigger that use and occupancy permit, but we could look to, beef it up a little bit, especially on that corner.
There are utilities that do run through there, so that will limit what they're going to be allowed to do.
That they're adding?
There's existing utilities that run through that.
Right, but it's like, it's an overgrown site of lots of trees, so it doesn't seem like it's...
Yeah, a good portion of those, a good portion of the existing trees along Beekman and 9D there that you see now are being removed just for simple construction of the site as it is.
Right, of course you're going to take, I understand that what's there now is not going to be there. I'm not saying that we want to keep what's there in conjunction with the construction, but it's a very prominent corner, and it deserves something more than just a grass corner. That's all I'm saying.
okay. So,
You could perhaps think about above-ground planters that can be moved, should maintenance, we could be really creative about this corner because it's really prominent.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think about those, in urban settings, those parts of the city that become, I wouldn't necessarily go so far as iconic, but just beloved, right? You almost immediately develop a sort of a fond feeling about them because of the experiences, right? And because and what the environment, again, in this case, the built environment provides for in terms of that experience. That's all I'll say. So then, as far as the ARB, board recommendation to refer the applicant to the ARB at this point. Any thoughts on that, or otherwise a motion to do so? Motion by Randall.
Seconded.
Second by Len. All in favor?
Aye.
Anything else we can do for you tonight? Thank you. And thank you for your patience with me. I know I'm turning into an asshole as I've gotten older. Sorry.
Just one minute. Justin, just take a look at the new local law with regards to parking and requirements for stormwater and everything else, and how it impacts us.
Okay, so that takes us to the next item on our agenda. Item number 4, the continued review of application for site plan approval, 14 North Cedar Street, 4-unit multifamily dwelling submitted by Servone Perucci. Good evening. Oh, Donna, great. Welcome back. Just about to come get you.
You forgot.
I did. See you again. Total jerk in my old age.
There's always time. You can always reform.
Nope.
It's never too late.
No going back.
Just call me the ghost of Christmas future.
I have a question about what the procedure is with this, what the process is. This is a site plan only, right?
For this applicant?
Right. Is there gonna be another review when it's,
Are you talking about this one now?
yeah, the Cedar one, yeah.
It's like a mini apartment building.
It also requires ARB at some point.
Okay. Those are the sort of things that.
Yeah. Hi, good evening.
Good evening. My name's Angelo Perucci. I'm the engineer, also the applicant. Working on get the computer. I know it's been a while since we.
Yeah, you came before us, what, last year sometime?
Yeah,
last summer?
Yeah. So I don't know if you guys have the plans in front of you, but we're proposing probably proposing a 2-story, 4-unit apartment building, 14 North Cedar. It's at the corner of Church and North Cedar. Last time we presented some changes. One, we're adding sidewalks on Church and North Cedar. We're also turning it into a 2-driveway where we're adding an entrance on Church Street and then a 1-way leaving on Cedar. I know we have comments we have to answer with the engineer and the planner. I'm more here to see what the board has, any requests they have. Also, one question I have is driveway length.
Driveway length?
Yeah, the width of the driveway on Church Street. I have it as 24 feet, and then over on Cedar I have 20 feet.
And so, not sure we can answer this, maybe, but what's the specific question?
I know in the planner's comments, she was asking, she was saying it has to be 24, but then also the board can make a request.
It might be able to be less. You're doing a one-way through.
Yeah.
So, 24 is typically for in and out.
Yeah.
But you are going to have to take a look at the new local law for parking regulations and adjust accordingly. Also, one of the comments I had is you have no accessible parking.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'm gonna add the, yep.
And you may want to look at relaying out the parking on your site, because those accessible parking stalls should be as close to the front as possible.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at the item 5A from Natalie's review, where she's offering that except for 1-family and 2-family dwellings, the maneuvering area needed to permit parked vehicles to enter and exit off-street parking spaces shall have a width of at least 24 feet. Are you talking about the width or the length?
The width.
Yeah, got it.
That's what I meant, my mistake.
Unless the planning board approves a lesser distance as adequate for areas with parallel or angled parking spaces. The applicant should clarify the proposed aisle width and discuss whether a width less than 24 feet is requested. So it sounds to me like you are requesting that, but at the same time, just given some of the other comments and specifically the idea of the ADA and then also in context of the new parking, I would prefer personally, and we'll hear from a board too, that we address that the next time we review this.
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah, no.
And again, I think then we'll have a better picture of if you are requesting a more narrow width, we'll have the full context
Gotcha.
within which to be able to judge whether that width, that narrower width is appropriate.
Okay.
Cool?
Yep.
Have we ever gotten renderings on this?
We only have at this point elevations.
I don't see
Where do we have
They
those?
weren't in the packet, although they were just this evening uploaded. They're in, if you were able to refresh
Oh,
that.
there we go.
Yep.
Oh, dear.
Well, that's not the response you want.
Wait, where is that?
Sound like me now.
It's a new edition.
So,
It's on Cedar Street right now.
Yeah.
It's, right now, it's mostly undeveloped lot with like a garage on it.
Yep.
Right,
Yep.
there's a little Fiat parked on the.
No Fiat anymore, but yeah.
Oh, it's
it
got
was.
it. Okay,
Yeah.
it was there.
Yeah,
Yeah, this was a lot that was a bit empty for a long time because it was in the transition zone. Originally, those were emptied for parking, for potential future parking lots. And this never made sense as a parking lot. It was one of the reasons why it made sense to do a transition zone, right?
Yeah.
That's the intent, to have these developed rather than being empty lots.
Yeah, no, I agree.
yeah.
That being said, there's probably improvements we can make to what's, right? But keep going, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you are obviously in receipt of Natalie's comments. I'm just scanning again on whether there is anything to highlight outside of any other questions you have about her comments.
So, our plan is to do a modular build. That's I know in the previous about doing architectural review. Is that still?
You're still subject to
Okay,
ARB.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just- okay.
Yep.
And it's important on the transition zones because you aren't given a lot of guidance, but it's still, all these are important parts of the city fabric that need to fit in.
Yeah. So we talked about parking layout and design. That's stuff that you're going to update for next month. She did make mention of lighting. Do you have any questions about her comments, just relative to, for example, details for proposed fixtures, cutoff levels, cutoff capability of those fixtures, proposed color temperatures? Is that all?
No, I got.
Okay.
Yeah, I can add that. I have.
Yep.
With Cree lighting, so.
Okay.
There was a question about what your proposed use for the existing storage building will be.
So we're just gonna use it for like, say, snow blower, lawn mower, more or less like stuff around the.
Does it need to be so big? Because you could,
It's an existing building.
right, well,
Are you recommending they chop it?
You want to cut it in half?
well, you could eliminate the past needing to have 2 driveway cuts and, relook at the parking layout by or even relocating it, yeah. I mean, it's a big building for just some snow, there's not much yard equipment, so it just seems like an intense use on a site that could be perhaps better used.
You're going from a very pervious site to a very impervious site.
Yeah.
Is there a way to retain some of that vegetative state of that site, more so than what you have?
So like right now I have 2 parking spots on the southern part of the lot, closest to the garage. I'm thinking about maybe taking 1 parking spot away, make it more
Well,
grass.
I think you need to look at what you have going in first, especially with adding the ADA, the access aisles.
I will also want to do more calculations of, I got to see the soil of over there and possibly do from the house, do like a seepage pit, go right to roof leaders.
Okay, so any infiltration type system will want to come out and witness when you do the testing. You can do your initial testing, but we'll want to verify.
Okay, yeah. Who would I contact you or contact the building department, like if I? Okay.
This is John Clark. Did not like this. I have to bring this.
Why am I not seeing your notes, John, on this?
They're posted with the last agenda, the August or July.
Oh, so they're the old notes. Oh, you got a
From
copy?
last
They're old
month.
but new, because they were never read, so.
So you just put a new date on them, is what you're saying?
No, it's the same day from July.
Oh, July, okay. So you got a lot of notes here. Any questions on the engineer's notes?
No. I have one question also about, like, the parking. I'm using, like, arborvitae's to block, to create so people don't see from. Is that an issue at all, or?
What are you doing?
So I'm using, like, the trees. They're planted along
Church Street.
on Church Street. Is that any issue?
Any thoughts on
Yes.
arborvitae? All I know of arborvitae is otherwise known as deer candy. They love to eat it. And then you're left with these trees that have like all this green up top, and then they're all munched away down at the bottom.
Oh, I live in Pennsylvania, and I have deer all over. I've never seen them eat my arborvitae.
Do we have any deer left? Am I thinking of the right tree?
Yeah, you might be right. It's,
They probably have a lot other things to eat out there.
Not on my house.
Used to be in my garden. They had 5 at a time.
No, I think just, evergreen obviously is an important
Yeah.
component to screening, right, year-round.
yeah.
And then something that deer don't destroy is probably wise, just for maintenance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, arborvitae, look into that.
How many deer are on Church Street?
There are deer all over the place.
Yesterday there was 3.
It was quiet. All right, so any other elements to your review that you'd like to highlight for the applicant?
No, I think he has his homework to do as far as what he needs
Agreed.
to go through.
Okay. Yeah, and I think also, yes, your application is subject to architectural review. You're going to need to prepare some more relative to, colors, details, again, lighting.
Okay.
So it's a little early for us to recommend you to the ARB. So-
Yeah.
Can we encourage them to? Is it possible while we're trending in that direction that we could encourage looking at some other, if you want to go with a modular basis, but maybe looking at some other architectural elements that would be
Yeah.
kind of more in keeping what's around, to take a look at what's around in the neighborhood and maybe.
Yeah.
So I think this is, what you're showing us right now is pretty different than the surrounding structures.
Yeah, can I
Yeah.
comment? I really think that you should re-examine how you're developing this lot. First off, the building, right, isn't situated on the lot like any other residential building in the neighborhood, right? So it's going to stand out as an apartment block that looks like a housing project or something. It's not going to be attractive. It doesn't matter what sort of decorative elements you put on it. The way that it's set up on the lot, right? It's not going to appear in scale or in the way it's used, the entrances, the doors, all this other stuff, in any way like the rest of the fabric of that neighborhood. And that neighborhood is a nice neighborhood, right? This is an empty lot, and it should be improving it. It shouldn't be detracting from the other neighbors. And you should be polite in that way. You should be a good neighbor to them, right? Don't take any of this wrong. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm trying to give you constructive.
No, I'll take
Because the city of Beacon has spent a lot of time trying to make people give it the sort of respect that it deserves, right? This is the old fabric in this town is something that doesn't exist in many places. And it's really beautiful, and that's why people love this town so much. So every time you put a building in that detracts from that or goes against that or doesn't look like it belongs, looks like it belongs somewhere else, really diminishes the experience for everybody. So that's one thing. The other thing is your parking. So that's the way the building is, the doors are set up and the way that it's situated on the site should be more like the way the other residences approach the street in the rest of the block, right? You can't have the big front yards, but you can do something that looks like that, looks more like that. The other thing you're doing is you're covering the entire lot in asphalt, okay? I don't think you need to have 2 curb cuts. Every time you add a curb cut, you're removing street parking. Street parking is very precious in the area, right? You're also creating a huge amount of water that's in an impervious area that's just going to wash out onto the street. It's going to be you're going to have to pay to manage that, right? So the least amount of parking, you're paying less money for the less parking. If you can just cleverly figure out a more efficient way to fit it behind the building, you have less parking to hide. You're paying less for that, and you're also paying less for the infiltration work, the stormwater mitigation you have to do. So that might be worth maybe thinking whether that storage building is worth it if you can do that. Also, the more thoughtful you are about the way that you're building this, the more valuable it's going to be, right? There are other buildings that are attractive, that have nice, nice landscaping, that have painting, that are more attractive, right? Even for apartment buildings, 4-unit buildings, those are going to be worth like twice as much as a sort of low-budget box that you put on there, right? And you're going to be borrowing money for this anyway, right? So I would suggest that you look into that. The other thing, and this is my personal thing, is that my experience from people that I've talked to is that modular buildings don't give the cost benefit. In reality, when you price it out using the tradesmen and all the other sites customization that you have to do, that doesn't work the way that the people that are selling that tell you. That if you have somebody who's just a commercial stick builder, right? I would competitively cost that out. The other thing about modular houses is you won't have a lot of options. You'll be stuck. If we start telling you like, nah, these dormers are stupid looking, right? And we're not going to approve this stupid looking building because the Architectural Review Board has the ability to do that. We cannot approve your building if it's really detrimental to the fabric of the city. You're going to have really limited options if you use a modular building. If you have a custom building, a dormer this big or that big, right? It's very little. It's the same amount of labor, same amount of materials, right? But if the modular builders have to change anything, all of a sudden, like I'm not going to re-engineer this commodity that we crank out that's identical for every site. They're not going to do it for you, or they'll charge you much more money than a stick builder will, okay? So I know that you've put a lot of effort into this, and you've also sort of shifted a lot of the design responsibility on the modular builder and other things. I think that it's going to be worth it for you to put that extra effort into first improving the location of the building, right, and the way that it looks, so that it appears more like the rest of the fabric, so that the site plan is both more efficient and less expensive because of that efficiency, right? A better way that it's more integrated with the fabric, the current fabric of the city. And also the architectural expression that you're using, right? All those things are going to cause you to spend a little more time, right? Because you have to work with design professionals that are talented, right? You can't just order this stuff out of a book. So it takes a little time, takes some effort on your part, but it's going to be really worth it. So that's the suggestion I'm going to make for you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Anything else? Any other comments or observations? Okay. Anything else we can do for you this evening?
That's it, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks.
Okay, so that concludes our regular meeting agenda. We have 2 items under miscellaneous business, specifically extension requests. The first one is for us to consider a request for 2 90-day extensions of subdivision and site plan approval, 152, 158 Fishkill Avenue. Personally see no reason why not to grant this request. Anyone else?
This is the one by Main Street, right?
Yeah.
T District? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Audubon. Yeah.
I don't
Nope.
see a reason to deny it.
Yeah, so I will then accept a motion to approve this request for 2 90-day extensions.
Motion to approve request for 2 90-day extensions by
Motion
Len.
by Len,
Second.
second by David, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Then the other request is for us to consider approving, same, 2 90-day extensions of internal property subdivision approval. This is for the 7-lot internal property subdivision, 18 to 30 Edgewater Place. Again, these are all, in my view, administrative, so no specific reason I can think of why not to grant. So then, therefore, I will accept a motion to approve.
Motion.
Motion by David,
Seconded by Len.
second by Len, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, so that brings us to a quick 30-second break. I shouldn't bring my water with me. Before we go into architectural review, on to certificates of appropriateness. So be right back. Thank you. Finished at least for you at 9 o'clock. Okay. We're in order. That was fun.
Take that away.
Good evening. How are you? What do you got? Careful, I got the hammer. So we are looking at, sorry, I lost my place here. It's online.
Howland Avenue.
This is the one we said.
Is this the one, the subdivision that's set back?
Yes. Project comments from last month regarding windows. We added some windows.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, yes, I remember this one.
Yes.
Yep.
Dan was here.
Yes.
Last month. So on the right side of the house, we added windows on either side of the, I give you a floor plan this time as well. There are windows on either side of the fireplace.
Oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Where was originally going to be some bookshelves or what have built-ins, but we've done that. We've also added a window on the left side, which is in the garage. Gives you a second window in the garage, where there was one before. We've added a second window.
Oh, right up front here.
It's in the garage, but it's just for
Yeah.
Natural light, I mean,
to
why
break up
not?
the wall. I know there was some comment about the side, the different sidings, the shakes up above, so we want to do one siding across the board.
Yeah.
All vinyl.
Ma'am? Yep.
Should be it. Yep, sorry. I thought don't you have these?
I do, I just lost my place on the, I'm just hovering on that. Oh, yes, and then the porch.
And the deck, so unfortunately, if you look on the front porch, it still shows, that's just her program.
I think that's
That's
fine.
not what the wood.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not
I understand.
depicting that. We were always going to clad it with the AZAC.
Okay.
The decks, and the front porch.
Including these piers, these little posts?
The posts are going to be, shouldn't be exposed at all, but if they are, we can.
Yeah, they're set back, and hopefully at some point they'll be covered with foliage, some kind of planting.
Yes.
Yeah, no, honestly, this looks great. Yeah, I appreciate your taking the time to make some modifications that really help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, it's better, right?
Yep.
Yeah. At least last month I didn't go as hard as you did on REA. I love the guy, he's an old friend, but come on. Anyway, okay. Any other thoughts around the board?
Nope, looks good.
Motion by Randall to what? Motion to approve by Randall.
Second.
Second by David. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Good to see you.
Good.
And I just want to say, John, that I've tried to hurt Ari's feelings, and I don't think.
I don't think you can, actually. There's Teflon. Good night. Thank you.
He did not look thrilled. He gets really quiet.
Yeah, no. He's got a tough skin, but I don't know. Sometimes I can't hear myself. Yeah, I know. Hi, good evening. Come on up.
It's a site that he's got.
There's a fucking parking lot of.
Sure. Yeah, you may.
No, it's amazing.
Yes.
Asking to change the back box to a slightly gabled roof. We had a lot of comments. My partner and other friends thought it looked too warehousey with two boxes. It didn't really fit well with the other houses. If you look, the other houses have slight gables, and from the front, it actually looks almost flat. This is the side.
Let me ask you.
It doesn't look that big from the side.
So you did this in order to, I guess what I'm hearing you say, be a little bit more contextual, or was there some other structural or physical reason?
Without getting into that, my architect said don't talk about that, but Mike Carmine, structural engineer, prefers this. He prefers the gabled roof for structural reasons and also for water runoff. For me, as I'm the GC and involved, I really need to have that gabled area for my HVAC. The air handler, because for energy efficiency, I put two systems in, and there's no place to put it in a flat roof, and it created noise the last time I lived in a house, my own house, flat roof, so.
Makes sense. When you're looking at it uphill, right? You're down here, you're looking at it, it actually will have a similar effect.
It looks
Yeah.
almost flat, but there are a couple of houses on the street that have a slightly gabled, and
Okay.
I thought they were flat, but when I got really close,
I think actually the elevation change is going to accentuate the roof. You're going to see more, because you're lower, you're going to see more of it.
You did some other things here, too. I mean, this looked a lot different the last time we saw it.
Yeah, here.
That's,
you can see, yeah, again, we tried to make it less warehousey looking. It looked a bit.
Is it shorter? It seems like, because,
Is that, what's the white? What's the
Stucco.
material?
We're
It's
gonna do
stucco.
stucco
Oh, my.
and clapboard. Clapboard will be either black or a cedar.
What you want to be careful about is that you do drip edges on everything, because the problem with flat stucco is that driven rain will hit it. It'll hit a window edge, and then there'll be areas where water.
Yeah, I've already talked about
You know what I'm talking
with the
about.
stucco. I've used it before.
Yeah,
I did
you know what I'm
it on
saying.
the street, and there'll be lots of gutters.
There's ways to do that, and also you may want to break it up with beading or other things that will be like minor
There'll be
dripping.
a wide metal edging.
this is what it looked like.
Now, remember?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but thank you.
quite a departure from last time.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say, just as my personal observation, it's a bit of a step backward aesthetically.
Because of the cedar. The cedar was expensive, I'm sure.
No, it's not the cedar, it's just that I'm not really interested in doing that with metal. It's not something I want to do on that street. I just think it's too warehousey, it doesn't look good in the neighborhood. And, I needed to tone it down.
Well, I don't know, this really seems boxy to me, than the other one had a softer touch to it, so, but who am I?
It's also very, it's tricky.
Don't you think you could treat where the garage door is, this area, differently like you did on the other one? In a way that,
There's an option
this is
with
better, it's simpler, and I think I like it.
Well, let me ask
But
you this. Is there a way to, so you mentioned you don't like metal, but there's a way to achieve the lines that you had previously without metal? I mean, this could be painted wood, right? And then, just in terms of being able to house equipment, it almost looks to me like you're going up almost the same height here in this previous version as you are here. And I'm curious, is this intended to be accessible where you're putting the equipment? By a human? For servicing, or?
Well, there'll be a crawl space, you know, like,
So you would also, I know it's flat roof also then, I mean, flat roofs aren't always, they're not actually flat. They're pitched obviously to be able to drain to something, whether it's an exterior scupper or, you know, some kind of interior. But so my point is, I don't see how you wouldn't be able to achieve housing your equipment in a more rectilinear fashion rather than this, with the same height, the same crawl space.
You're saying do the flat roof, but we don't like the way it looks. I mean, we have quite a few people say just the two flat roofs on that street, it's just too much. So
Who, neighbors?
No, my partner and friends that are, you know, have good aesthetics.
I'm not sure I agree
It
with
is
your
different
friend.
from- I mean, flat roof would be different from probably anything else on the street, but that doesn't mean it's
Good.
not.
I mean, whether you like the two flat roofs better or not, the gable behind will look good. I mean, I just got back from Europe, and there are quite a few mixed, you know, buildings that have a gable and a flat roof. It's really good.
I don't necessarily agree, and I think it ends up looking a little bit more like a, sort of a bland, kind of almost office building, rather than a design of a residence. Yes, somewhat of a departure from the context, but with a little bit more thought to proportion and elegance. So it's a step back.
I think the roof lines need some work from the front elevation, like.
I mean, if you're starting to introduce this language, the gable, to me, it looks like it's just sort of a.
The relationship between them doesn't really, at least in the rendering.
Yeah, the rendering shows a different relationship than the
You're
hard line
looking-
elevation.
You're
even.
looking up at it, because this is this roof down here, right? And this line is up here, so you're looking up from the street, and they look like they line up, but they don't.
Is this intended to be a perspective up,
Yes.
not a flat-on elevation?
That,
Mercedes, did she send out?
It would be nice to see an elevation, because it looks like there's quite a bit of.
yeah, I'm imagining this in 3D in my head, and I don't think it's as bad as this elevation shows it, no way.
Because there's,
Really, the only
you
change
can't
we're
see
making
this whole
is
space,
Yeah.
right?
changing the roof to gable. This is terrible from the side.
But I really think, there's two things that might happen. One of them, you may need a grill there for your
But
for your
the
equipment.
window and the garage door, it's a whole perspective.
See, the window's gone.
Yeah.
It's a
You can't see it behind the.
Perspective from
Yeah.
That's over
It's there, but it's obscured, I guess is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say.
Okay, let's look at that.
Another thing you could do, and I don't want to, we could go on and on because it's fun, but you could use, it's not.
The elevation,
like-
the proposed elevation is showing the horizontal siding on the front building,
Yeah, not stucco.
not stucco.
Yeah. Is it, so,
And then on the
You
back
mean the first,
volume.
you mean the first one?
No.
That you submitted or no?
this one?
You're showing siding here, you're not showing siding there, you're
Yeah,
calling
so-
out siding there, and.
Yeah.
So, I think it's
I'm
not
not-
clear what you're doing.
Well, we want to do both.
Oh.
I don't know if you need to know exactly, a lot of it has
We
to
do.
do with.
We do.
Okay, so just,
Yeah, that's the
we have a
challenge.
preference, I mean, we were going to, as you know, things are very expensive these days, so we were going to bid out and try to get, pricing.
Add alternates
on
is what we call them.
alternates, yeah, so, but, do you have a preference
deduct
with the
alternates.
clapboard in the front or the back? And color?
I think
Cedar or?
the clapboard in the front softens the,
Well, I agree. I think it gives it a little bit more visual
And
interest.
And do you have a preference to a natural cedar cedar or black or gray?
Not black.
Everybody likes natural colors, natural materials. That's it, by far.
Very light, natural cedar, as opposed to a gray marble is what I would like to do.
Yep.
And then it's going to look really contemporary with a nice shade off of white stucco with some serious black trim.
I would suggest, because one of the reasons why it looks nicer with the vertical or whatever, to have two different materials there, is that there's a contrast between the two volumes. It's like the two volumes are treated differently, and there's a little contrast there. And if you were gonna do the stucco all across, I would use a slightly different tone of gray, or not some radically different color, but just something that's a shade darker or lighter, darker, I would say, for the receding volume, so that it's popped out, you know?
I gotta make the request that you've determined what it is you want to do. And I know you've got this concept of add or deduct alternates. Whatever we approve here, and depending on however many alternates you have and then ultimately end up choosing, unless it's exactly what you originally submitted in terms of your pricing package and what you're submitted to us, if it changes, you got to come back to us anyway. So my recommendation is that
Why don't you do the pricing and then figure out what you want and then come back and show
I
us what
mean,
you
I
want?
just really need to start the project. I've got a mortgage on this.
sure, I understand.
If, I mean, there's no way to.
I just don't know personally, I don't know what we're approving, because there's
How about
just,
we leave it the way it was and we just do the gable roof? So.
again, that's a mishmash of two different things that are part of your submission here. I thought we had this nicely in the bag when we left you last time. And now we're hearing that it could be this, it could be that, and then it could be a kind of a mashup of what used to be and now what we're trying to, we have to have some piece of material that reflects what it is you're actually going to build in order to approve, to say, yeah, go ahead and go build that. You understand our dilemma?
Right. The only way that we could save the month, right, is by giving explicit direction and saying, this has to be, this will be a condition of approval, or, that it would have to be supplied.
We still would need to see something to reference that,
Yeah.
because it's too arbitrary.
Yep.
It's way too arbitrary. It gets too confusing. We waste time, she wastes money. We don't want to do that. We need to do it right.
Yep, so to that end, our suggestion to you is that you come back to us with what it is you're actually going to build.
Well, why don't I just go back to what you approved at the last meeting?
That's an
Do that.
option.
Yeah, that's what I'll do.
That's an option you have. Yeah. Okay. Our apologies, and thank you. All right, so with that, do we have to, yeah. I don't know if we have to actually act on that. So as submitted.
Was it, so I think we do. Don't we have
Yeah, I
to-
think we do,
have to
yeah.
actually-
So, material by applicant as submitted, a motion to disapprove.
Motion.
Motion by Karen,
Seconded.
second by Len, all in favor?
Aye.
And then, I guess, then we'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Motion by Karen. Second. Second by Kevin, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Somehow I